Well, welcome. I am Tim Mayo, part of the festival organizing committee. This year's festival is made possible by the generous support of our festival sponsors, Brattleboro Community Television, Jenny Altschuler, Barry Green, Elizabeth Catlin, the Stepansky Family Trust, and the Vermont Humanities Council, and poets and writers. We would also like to thank our advertisers, and we encourage you to support them. They're in that little book of ours. The festival is run entirely by volunteers, but has real expenses. So we encourage you to make a donation at one of the donation boxes sometime this weekend, or you can use the QR code to donate online through our website. And we also have little cards at the back, which one side is a donation side and with a QR code on it, and the other side is a survey with a separate QR code for that. Okay. So please take a moment to turn off your ringer on your cell phone, but feel free to use it to take photos and share them with us on social media. Colin Channer was born in Jamaica and educated there and in New York. His most recent collection, Console, published in 2023 by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. Console was listed for the Penn Volcker Award and named a New Yorker Best Book of the Year, a recipient of the Barnes & Noble's Writers for Writers Award from Poets and Writers, and a Cullman Fellowship from the New York Public Library. Colin Channer teaches at Brown and was appointed Poet Laureate of Rhode Island in 2024 for a 5-year term. His poems have appeared in The Atlantic, the Poetry Review, Conjunctions, and other venues. One of the meanings of the word dub is to provide a musical soundtrack, and another is used as a noun as a musical genre that originated from reggae in the late 60s, characterized by remixing existing recordings and emphasizing the rhythm section lastly. I believe dub is also the name of a friend of Colin Channer's. Is that right? In any case, this leads me to the one-word title of Colin's book, Console or Console, which is a noun, console, well, okay. One of them is a noun, which can refer to a cabinet or a piece of furniture or an electronic system, which could be for mixing sound. Or lastly is a verb which means to comfort someone. To get a handle on this title and metaphor depends upon what syllable you want to put the accent on. Is it some post-colonial plea for consolation, or is it mixing poetry on a console and making a Jamaica raga whose embellishments create a voice and music that rediscovers for the poet a world he already knows, but which is a new discovery for us here in New England. As Colin Channer writes in his poem Ojea, in Spanish, cups have ears, which means not handles. So we begin to cup our ears to his poems. And we find a world off-kilter to New England English by roughly 1,800 miles. However, we are not unconsoled by this, because using this play on words to make the music of his poetry, Channer weaves this metaphor to introduce us to a life born from and enmeshed in Caribbean culture. His poetry tells us we are brethren, cousins in an English-speaking world that may, slowly but surely, be linguistically drifting apart into new languages, and that we should marvel at this rich evolution. So as this reading is being recorded, I ask you to please dub a hearty welcoming applause for Colin Kenner.
Best intro ever, best intro ever. Tim Mayo. Oh my goodness. Thank you everybody for coming. It's my first time at the festival. I've lived in envy for a very long time, Maybe they'll invite me one day, I don't know. And then the invitation came. And to be reading with Martín Espada, a poet I used to dream of meeting when I moved to America in 1982. By then he might have had one book. And I've been wanted to meet him since then. Now, 20 books in, I'm sitting next to him and sitting next to Lauren. Two fabulous poets together in one unity. And also to see, Chard de Nord, I've always envied his name. How can you not be a successful poet with another Chard? Or a 1970s French actor, Francis Chard de Nord, So it is such an honor and a pleasure to be here in Brattleboro. So I'm going to start off with a poem by the name of Spumante. Weeks diffuse into each other like they're sprayed. Jetted, they shoot certain. Days, times, doodles, kept appointments. Next is lull, pool, fading, flash, disperse. I was shook and shocked by death. Chanced upon it on a winter walk. Proof of plod for miles behind me, swept in fog. A wet so thick it settled, blended with the snow that settled plenty on the sand. It was not yet daybreak, and I'd driven miles to walk and think, find peace in sweat and sea racket, that ancient, wise, asthmatic sound. The light took its lazy time for lifting. In the shift, I saw a darker shaping than the gray. At 2 miles, a boat of some proportion. At 1/4 mile, a whale. Since then, I've been lamenting, moving as if held in gel. At night, I dream it. See it stretched across the rack of high tide, belly to the stars, flung shells and gravel, throat part grooved, fins unflappable, balletic flukes symmetric in their pointing, how they fused. All this in half-light, all this in sea dirge, wet air matte toned silver, and I hunched in the hood of my parka, god-awed before Shavasana, stilled as if the glassy eye that looked to me had fixed me in a century of tintype. Agape, I've only recently discovered love of animals. Well, Killy, Nan, and Rebus, friends' dogs. Now I've partly taken leave of language, have given incoherent due. I know what it's like to be mammal, filled with deepest ocean sounds, oblivion, solitude, stillness intermitted by quake roar, tectonic slipping, lava fissures, ship propellers drilling, the human croons of whales. There is slave in me, fat heritage. No fluke, I'm invested with hurt. Echoes of the hunted, located, natural rights redacted, meagered to resource. All is flux as I'm collapsing love and distance, moving through the gel, my life, edging the canals of my city, climbing up its hills, memory aerosol, head in self-cloud, getting Melville as I should have, watching at him contemplate the vista from a landlocked house, hills becoming pods of transmigrating giants, Greylock, Berkshire range. There's thirst for music in this less than solid state. Ampless back in my office, I knee prop my Fender, ancient black thing, strum it, casual, weep. Suck salt in darkness, fingers guessy, lazing up the sound. Still something brusque runs up me. Shuddered wood, that deep flesh shook that makes string music fuse to you. The thumbing further breaks the thing in me. I know what now love is. No tentative for sure. Its incoherence, its jelly analog is mine for life. The windows stay black and phlegmatic as the air outside begins to heave with rain. I hum, thumbing, fashion something of a home, some sucker. Pulse quick but steady as I deep dive to dub. With it comes the baleen, wheeze of mouth organs, plangent blue whoop. I am dub, and dub is water. Exile, I wish you could have lived in me. Plunging life spumante. I'd slip my hold on you like magma shot for islands every single time you breach. You come to Vermont, you can get great introductions and applause. Look at that. So, as Tim mentioned, I'm from Jamaica. So I have a complicated history in that I'm Jamaican by birth. I'm American by citizenship, but I'm Trinidadian by divorce. And my mother-in-law, Janet Fouché, was wonderful. I miss her more than and she was a great cook. She was a great cook. She was a great cook. And she had all of these sayings, you know. Ma, as we called her, she could use the word ting to mean anything. So my son's name is Makona and my daughter's name is Addis. And I would come home, she said, all Mackie doing today, he's tinging your sister. He just keep tinging him and tinging him. And she got so ting. And I said, why you tinging she so? And he started to tell me all sort of ting about the thing she does do him. And I knew exactly what you meant. Right? And she died when, a few years after we were divorced. And I had to make up my mind whether or not to go to the funeral. As I mentioned, my mother-in-law was what I miss most about the marriage. And I went. She used to work at the Days Inn on 57th Street in Manhattan on the West Side. She was one of the ladies who would, and I say ladies because they would hire only women for those jobs, you know, this telephone operator. Phone comes in, you know, you plug something in. That was her job. And then she got ALS, and it was slow. but I had to go because I loved her dearly. And the last argument she had, she got the last word. So maybe now, in her silence, I could defeat her. So this poem is called All the Kinness in Foil Shrouds for Janet Fouché. You call tilapia snapper's cousin. Kingfish, in-law like to shark. You styled Jamaicans zealous with ginger, lax to mash all spice, good bad though with soup, but all you do provisions clumsy, the yam not cut up like the meat. Jan Love, now you're silent, brazing in respect, hat-lidded, eyes in owlish glasses, sclerotic winds, wings crisscrossed. True grand, nomad for the children, gypsy cabber to track meets, recitations, sweetie cupboard in your purse. We hush toward your casket, filed the wooden pews, organ sotto voce, cane field rhythm thudding out. When God dished you garrigs, you took worship for the halt and stayed the hobble. Said the drugs would make you dunce. Now here you lie in garnish, room reserver at the motor inn, checked out. If I go to the after banquet, I may toast you, gourmandize while rueing, nod thanks for cuckoo warm and offered, all the kinness in foil shrouds, roti skins, transparent caskets I will leave with, the odor of belonging in my hair, prick crown of jerk, of curry, of escovitch and gungu, of sorrel and white rum, mother of my no longer wife, death vexes, I long to fight with you. Boy, bigger cock than you have crowed and ended up in my pillow. So one day, a few summers ago, my neighbor knocked on my door. Hey, who's there? It's him. And he said, listen, I have a favor to ask you. He said, my mother is visiting from Venezuela. She speaks no English, and I have to go to work. I need you to just keep her company, spend the day. I'm trying to finish this book, right? But I said yes, because he's my friend, he's my neighbor. He said, all you do is go down when you're ready. I'll let her know you're coming. You just go down, knock on the door, and she'll be ready. Okay. So I did as I was told. About 2 hours later, go down, knock on the door opens. I'd been expecting Abuelita. She was drop dead gorgeous, my age. I was taken aback. I didn't quite know. Then I'm realizing I'm older than I realize I am, of course. And she was, this is awkward. And she was like, she's ready to go out. I said, we're going out? Oh, okay. So the name of the poem is Oreja, which means ear in Spanish. And let me tell you, it's very brave to read this poem in the presence of Martín Espada. Can you imagine if I said, Oreja means ear, and he goes, no, it means nose. Oh, sorry, to rewrite the poem. So here we go. Oreja. Given time, I'd know the word. But had I not done duty, sight unseen, agreed to take Alberto's madre on a walk, I would not have learned the clave beat of boots and Roman sandals on our stone canal. Blood beat, it stayed reliant as a dog or cast shadow. the sound of middle life unleashed. And we rambled, arms looped in summer's rush wind, purposeful as migrants, but willfully naive. Navel-gazing neovatics, acting like tense did not matter, like what next was up to belief. Sun-stunned by August providence, bruised town west from where the Cape hooks the brawling sea, we moved in shook cloth, hair mask, and skin attar to the brink of town. To the brink, left downtown, sought art. From the hump and placed museum, we looked down, lights lighted, canal turned zip in gathered frock flung off. By then discussion was finished. I'd been humbled, embarrassed. Spanish sputtered when Caracas came up. Oh, wrecked Caracas. Bolivar sinking galleon, Chavismo's glowing tanker run aground. The museum was chilly. We caught breath in its smug cafe, sat thigh to thigh, spangling leftists bereft, sipping thoughtful, teeth and staring past the basement of our cups. Would know the word in time, but if I had not said yes to my friend, gone for that walk, in language made some rough wrong turns, I would not have been there feeling tender to texture's proletariat, the millions of slighted small words, started with redundance, Ana Maria indulged, eyes, ojos, eyebrows, cejas, lash, pestaña. I see her face on teacups now. She taught tazas don't have handles. In Spanish, cups have ears. Two more poems, and then I'll have the pleasure of just sitting here and listening to a great poet be a great poet. I'm going to read How Long Could I Have Been Weightless? And this whole poem started because I was once in a relationship with a Target truck. You know when you're driving a long distance and there's just a vehicle with you, and this big white Target truck with a big circle on the side, miles, we're just driving together, you know? I would go ahead and you would go ahead, and then we broke up. How could I have been, can I find, yeah, how long could I have been weightless? After the smooth up pull, the car dove fish efficient in the tractor trailer's wake. By then, the thick wheel cuts had tapered down the long curved grade, then vanished, leaving undulations in the drifts. All the way from Montreal through French-toned Vermont, we'd held to, mostly all alone, through nighttime Massachusetts, the Berkshires rhythmic now, the rise and fall of roadways lung-like up and down, the black outside squelching with each splat. The snow fell lazy-seeming, but the mass had force to it, a will thrust like those of sea currents, and in the downrush, the car's back end began to flex. The side muscling came in series, ripples, quivers, pulse, and I was in it, counter-steering while the coffee spilled in the careening into, through, and out of what the frost-dim lights could see. All murk then. The whole world untrustworthy. Murk and splat and splat and speed and ridges. The rudder backlit by dials, the fingers and their grips, The road itself a reef, and I was skidding, and tread and rode, unbonded into flight. How long could I have been weightless? Does it matter now? I reach now to recall what flew by me. Trees in kelp shadow, jellied embankments, snow shoals, formations of a world so much like ours, just underwater, glimpse of where we're headed by degree. By degree. 4 wheels on the snow again, clutching, shifting, easing down, compression bracing on momentum's rush, I saw it. Deep snow swashed in fan pattern to the breadth of the road, the white rig turned over, red stamp on the side of it, strike of harpoon. What fluke of luck had saved me? Which flake had launched me to air, to water, racing my breathing, slowing me down? So the last one we're going to read is a poem from my first collection, Providential. It's called Knowing We'll Be Mostly Wrong. And it's a poem for and about parents. Right? So my father was a policeman. My mother was a pharmacist. And they looked very different. They were very different. My father was a very, 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 very light-skinned man. My mother is a very, 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 very dark woman who married my father, partly because she was raised in a colonial society. And she said she didn't want her children to be dark like her because she didn't want them to suffer. And so she married him as an alcoholic, among many things. He's a good guy, but he was timid and shaky, and he wanted to be a priest all his life. And then his brother told him, he said, if you go to seminary but you don't get a church, you don't have a job. And he goes, oh. He said, his brother said, but you're tall. Your feet aren't flat. You could be a police. And they get paid every month. My father became a policeman with the personality of a priest. So my mother would tell the story of when there were going to be raids of street vendors, he would go out the day before and tell them, don't come out today. He didn't like confrontation. Don't come out, don't, right? But the real end of the marriage came one day. My dear father was explaining something to my mother, and he would call her Mother Pepper because she was hot. And he was gesturing to make a point. My mother is about 5'3", he's about 6'4". She said, we don't do gesticulating in this house. Put his hand behind it. And she said, Charlie, you know what I do for a living. I can kill you, and the coroner will never find out how you died. That man left that house quick. But my sister was very close to him because she was about 14 at the time. And that separation hurt her very badly. So this is a poem for parents, knowing we'll be mostly wrong. We never had a meal alone, ever alone, just us. We might have, but the memory is gone. When I see you eating, we're never there, me, Gary, or Mum. It's always you and Claudette. It's always late, quiet, no buses. Every now and then a motorbike muttering up the road. The rest of us have eaten, done homework, traveled the planet once again through Viewmasters, tongued poppy doo-doo from the garden, watered the common hibiscus and crotons, washed our feet and gone to bed. The food has been fridged, fricassee chicken, or stew beef with carrots, or pig trotters with broad beans, or macaroni with mince. You're too drunk to take what's been set apart for you, to negotiate each thing without overknocking bottles, to prime the stove, light each burner, set the knobs correctly for the blue beneath the pot. Yes, somewhere in some other country, there were microwaves and frozen courses for drunk husbands. But when your outside woman didn't feed you, you were left out on your own. You and Claudette are pulling at the quilty bread you've brought under your arm, smearing the off-white with pink bully beef, Libby's or Grace, smutted with tan fat and bronze jelly. She's 12 and already plumping from eating 2 dinners, already using nighties and dusters and house frocks to fog her shape. Your knee is unsteady when she sits. You know you can't ask her to ease up. You kiss her cheek, hand feed her. Let her bring the raw Scotch bonnet to your mustache. Line it up for you to crunch it while she pinches at the stalk. My son, who's 10 years older than I was when I last saw you, will soon leave for school. A downhill walk from the heights of Providence, downtown through its sad reaching for recovery, across an interstate that mainlines to Boston. He goes to Classical High. It's the last day of the term. I am up before him as always, and not because I am good, but because he needs direction, watching, coaching step by step into the sweet how of simple things, like getting up and getting dressed, keeping track of time, checking off reminders, the small bits of habit that if multiplied can bring him bounty. He's 16, but young, tender-hearted, and has just one friend, but a good one. Has never tried Facebook, doesn't see the need to tweet, makes elaborate illustrations in moleskin only, and takes his medication now without embarrassment, no longer uses their official name, just the pills, which make him feel the way he does after a hard lap swim, relaxed, even, and balanced, not like he's about to drown from all this everything, or walk on water fire just to dazzle everybody with his light. At his age, you were farming. In that red ground district, that's all there was to do. Spade and hoe and scatter corn to gray pigs and hand off seeds to the wind to do the rest. Make rough note of which black goats, which boy was herding down which trail toward which common, which shirtless boy, I should have said, because all boys in red ground districts then were shirtless and walked on flat ground with bent knees from the practice of rolling with the hills, had toes spread wide like fingers, and were short for their age. Your grandson is tall, slender in the way of his mother and her ilk, but not petty and vindictive. Open and forgiving like you, of other people, but also of himself, which can be its own concern. This morning, over sugared coffee concentrated in a German press, I gazed at my son from one end of a short table covered with a cloth decorated with yellow zigzags, something I picked up from an outlet. The wood is good, Italian, and he still spills milk and juice. On this, his last day of school, he is happy, not because school is ending, but because he's midway into a season of waking up and going to bed with no reason to consider not wanting more life. As I look at him, thinking of the Cape of Sad he drew around him when he moved here in the new year of an awful winter, he asked why I'd been laughing in my room. I feel put upon. I wasn't even aware I'd been laughing. And then I remember, but it's about one of those things you find funny for reasons you can't explain. So I keep saying, oh, it's nothing, and he keeps asking, and I want him to leave me alone and go back to feeling lonely and just go to school, live his own damn life. Then I remember you and your daughter, my sister, at a table, sharing time and something simple for the stomach. And imagine with the clarity of middle age how those nights when you came home drunk and she'd waited up for you. Times I might have glimpsed while going to the bathroom after wetting the bed. Times it was just the two of you at the grey and white formica table with the green creeper reaching out and over the clear glass bowl. Your holster slung over a chair, the brown horse neck of the black revolver. All of this lit, soft by accident, because low watts were all we could afford. The air outside fuzzy with warm dampness, and the furry atmospherics of dry leaves, stirred by mice, mongooses, and insomniac bugs. All of these things were perhaps the last ones she thought of that evening a few years ago when her heart stuttered on her way home from working at a halfway house in Pittsburgh, where she taught men who'd done time and time again, what it meant, what it felt like or could to have a simple meal in humble light with a person who had failed and would fail again. This morning, as my son leaves for school in his turquoise polo shirt and gray drawstrings, hair mown and edged off, he thanks me for the waffles and the coffee, and for taking the time to explain the joke. It is clear from his face he doesn't get it. But it's so personal, it can't be explained. Perhaps I failed at the telling, but he's smiling for the time at the table, and maybe for the light spreading on the meadow he was off to enter, unaware of all the ways I have already let him down, aware too of some ways I'm not tuned into, so can't mention, but I know the list is long. But I also know he's loving, is likely to be gracious in assessment, I hope. This boy who was mom handled out of anger, written off and given up on, in the end abandoned. The exile different from yours, in execution, but still a cut, a wound familiar to me, to us, Gary and Claudette, that fat girl in the house frock who'd always wait for you, who died riding in an ambulance alone. We begin to fail the sec we invest in the spec that makes the children. We do right, knowing we'll be mostly wrong. Thank you.
Should have made this for the people who are taller than me. Thank you very much, Colin, for that reading. Martín Espada, known for his powerful and socially conscious writing, has published more than 20 books as a poet, editor, essayist, and translator. His most recent collection of poetry is Jailbreak of Sparrows, and his previous book, Floaters, won the National Book Award of Poetry and a Massachusetts Book Award. A former tenant lawyer with Su Clinica Legal in Greater Boston, Espada is a professor of English at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. In reading Martin's recent collection, Jailbreak of Sparrows, I noticed for the first time a certain tragic, comic tenor and gentleness in some of these poems. Yes, there are the well-written poems told with the power of metaphor, celebrating and elevating the humanity and deeds of the underdog and the revolutionaries Anglos may not have heard of before, but need to hear about. But there's something else. You first start to see it in the poem entitled Gonzo, who is an illiterate addict learning his letters and how to pronounce them for the first time. We're coming to the letter S, which he couldn't pronounce for lack of front teeth. His teacher doesn't miss a beat and just goes on to T. I know what that's like, even though I do have my front teeth. I still have a habit of lisping my S's out of the side of my mouth in a sort of shh sound. There's a courage to Gonzo that exceeds his vulnerability and standard definition of valor. But the big something else I see in this book can be heard in the tragic comic love poems of this collection. Just listen to their titles. Love Song of the Moa, where the speaker describes himself as a tall, flightless songbird scaring the other songbirds off the branches. Love Song of the One-Eyed Fish, where the speaker describes himself as a fish in a tank, doomed to swim in circles forever, so I cannot hide the hole in my face. And the title poem of the section, Love Song of the Disembodied Head in a Jar. In all of these poems, the fish, the moa, the disembodied head, present their vulnerabilities comically. They cannot fly, they have only one eye, they have no body. They are the voice of a poet willing to metaphorically bare his vulnerabilities to the one he loves. I don't remember ever reading poems like this before in any of Martin's collections. They fly like sparrows out of the jailhouse of Martin's heart. So let's flutter a wing together with our hands and welcome Martín Espada.
Buenas tardes. Much better. First of all, please give Colin Shanner another round of applause. And Colin Shanner is reading with Martín Espada. Martín Espada is reading with Colin Shanner. So, thank you, Colin. Thank you, Tim, for that introduction, for all your work. Thank you to the committee that put the poetry readings together. Thank you to my wife, Lauren, who is present on every page of this book, all the books I write. I want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon. And I want to thank all the people out on the street for the No Kings Are Out. And I especially want to thank those of you who are doing both. So I will read from Jailbreak of Sparrows, followed by the book signing pandemonium. And speaking of books, bookbans are back. You may have heard. A couple of years ago, there was a children's book about Roberto Clemente, banned and then unbanned in Florida, of course. So here is a Clemente story, combined with a coming-of-age story. For those of you who may not know, Puerto Rican Baseball Hall of Famer Roberto Clemente died on New Year's Eve 1972, delivering earthquake supplies to Nicaragua. I was 15 years old. We just left my Brooklyn birthplace for the suburb of Valley Stream, Long Island, and we were the only Puerto Rican family in town, of course. So this poem is called Big Bird Died for Your Sins. Barry was 6'6", 15 like me, loading layups and hook shots over our heads through the hoop in my driveway. We called him Big Bird for dwarfing us, for his slappy feet, for the mouth that hung in a grin at all our stories. We called him Big Bird because he would yell, "Foul!" every time anyone bumped him under the basket, as if we lived on Sesame Street. I liked Big Bird and his white boy afro. He never called me a greasy-haired spick under the hoop in my own driveway like Frankie, the clown on the block. On New Year's Eve, Roberto Clemente himself set foot on the prop plane at the airport in Puerto Rico, my father's island, boxes for Nicaragua stacked up after the earthquake, knowing that dictators Guardia Nacional would crack open the crates, greedy as a pillaging army if he did not loom over them. The DC-7, engine like a smoker's heart, 4,000 pounds overweight, sputtered 100 feet above the trees, then spiraled into the sea on a night when the moon deserted the sky, the keeper of a lighthouse dreaming drunk. A crowd kept vigil on the beach. His compañero, the catcher, dove and dove again between the fins that sliced the waves till the propeller's twisted hand rose from the sea, but never the body, never the ball player, never Clemente, never. My father told me, Roberto Clemente is dead. I could swear my father's eyes were red. I had never seen my father cry. This must be hay fever in winter. My mother saw him cry once, watching the funeral of JFK on television, the black riderless horse and the empty boots and the stirrups for the fallen. Later, the day after the baseball writers voted Clemente into the Hall of Fame, as the boys under the hoop toweled off and scooped up Cokes from a cooler, I said, when my father told me Clemente died, there were tears in his eyes. No one said anything, not even Frankie the clown. Big Bird stopped grinning. Big Bird was thinking. The whine in his voice was gone when he finally said, they only did that because he was Puerto Rican. They only did that because he was black. There was once an episode on Sesame Street where Luisa Maria taught Big Bird about the meaning of death, how we all die one day, and his yellow head drooped heavy as a sunflower. I feel sad, he said. I could have rolled the numbers out like the dice in my Stratomatic baseball board game. 317, lifetime average, 414 in the 1971 series, 3,000 hits, 12 gold gloves, the only walk-off inside the park grand slam in baseball history. I could have called on the spirit of a dead ball player to flood the screens in their heads with a leap and stab of the ball against the wall in right field that saved the no-hitter, the bark of the ball off his bat that fractured a pitcher's leg. I said nothing. I never said anything. Even when Frankie would croon his favorite song in my face, Spicka Spooka, the other boys would bathe in it. The next game began. I guarded Big Bird. I stomped on his slappy feet, spiked my elbows into his rib cage, rammed shoulder after shoulder into his back, blocked shots by jamming the ball into his chest. I knew nothing of karate, but kicked the air every time I yanked the rebound away. Foul, yelled Big Bird, like a song on the jukebox nobody wanted to hear. Foul. This was my hoop, so I couldn't foul out. I wanted to see Big Bird cry, like I saw my father cry. Big Bird sniffed. No one saw him sneeze. He squinted hard, but we all knew. That day, Big Bird died for the sins of the fathers who cursed at the dark ball players on TV in the living room where their sons could hear it all. I had a vision of Big Bird rising above the palm trees, igniting in the air like a feathery piñata too close to the spark of a cigarette, crashing into the sea, the sharks feasting on yellow feathers, Luis and Maria on Sesame Street, explaining the meaning of a puppet's death as the nation mourned. You may have missed it, but English is now, by executive order, the official language of the United States for the first time. And this cultural aggression is nothing new. It also has consequences for Latinos. Now, my father, Frank Espada, was a community organizer and a documentary photographer, a leader, some would say the leader of the Puerto Rican community in New York in the 1960s and 70s. But my father had a shameful secret. And one day, I found out. The monster in the lake. A city boy, I always wanted to go fishing. The DiFilippo brothers brought me to a secret lake where we cast our lines into the dark, the barbed lures spinning. I snagged a monster in the lake. I fought the monster, and my reel jammed. One of the DiFilippo brothers said, "That's not a fish." We waded into the water and dragged a rusty box spring on shore, festooned with the lures of failed fishermen. We plucked them off the coils and dragged it back. Whenever we went fishing, we would have more treasures to collect. Late that night, I felt the monster swimming beneath my feet. I walked down to the basement and saw my father hunched over a table in his white t-shirt and boxers. He flinched, as if I caught him whispering on the phone to a woman who was not my mother. "What are you doing?" I asked. I saw the pages of a Spanish dictionary and a legal pad where he had copied down the meaning of the words in longhand. "I'm learning Spanish," he confessed. My father, the rabble-rouser with the bullhorn. My father, the Puerto Rican who spoke for other Puerto Ricans in the papers. My father who left his island at age 11 and kissed the runway when he flew home at age 38. My father who had the Spanish slapped from his mouth like a dangling cigarette by teachers and coaches in the city where I grew up, could feel his Puerto Rican tongue shriveling, coated with gravel, drained of words. I left him alone in the basement, riddled with the hooks no one else could see. Well, as you heard in Tim's introduction, I had another life. I was a tenant lawyer with Su Clínica Legal. Su Clínica Legal was a legal services program for low-income Spanish-speaking tenants in Chelsea, right across the Tobin Bridge from Boston. Our clients came from the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and increasingly from Central America, from Guatemala, from El Salvador, refugees fleeing Reagan's wars, the beginning of the sanctuary movement, because they were all undocumented. I'll read a poem from those days. It's called The City Wears a Coat to Bed. If you have the book, it's on page 40 of your hymnal. The city wears a coat to bed. The white army of winter spreads across the city. Boilers and radiators die in their sleep, their skin cold to the touch in the morning. The city wears a coat to bed. The city watches the wraith of breath rise in the kitchen. On Friday afternoons, the judges slip off their black robes and drive home. There is no light in the windows of the courthouse. There is no one to read the affidavit or sign the injunction to shove into the landlord's hand so that heat courses through the heart of the boiler and the looping hard veins of the radiator again. No one to hear the tenant's story translated, her sons and daughters shivering in their coats on a mattress, snot on their sleeves. The judges and the landlord home or stopping in a bar. On the way home, she tells me instead. The lawyer who speaks Spanish and explains in Spanish why there will be no heat this weekend, why there is no one at the courthouse to listen, and still she pours her story into my ears till they swell to bursting. I walk her to the doorway of the office. The secretary is in the bathroom, the office space heater in the corner. Suddenly, I am steering the tenant out the door with the space heater in her arms as she says gracias over and over, and I say, okay, okay, knowing the secretary would yell my name louder than the time a drunk with a lightning scar in his belly charged for the door naked, but for his socks and a Salvation Army blanket. The secretary would not miss the office space heater till Monday. I am the hero of this story, riding the bus home across the bridge, till I remember the words I should have said about the glowing coils too close to the mattress. How every week another fire rolls the smoldering wraith of winter through the bedroom as sons and daughters sleep. How every week EMTs tuck white sheets over bodies dead as a landlord's boiler. I will dream with eyes open of windows, the coils of space heaters, and the coils of mattresses glowing in every window. You also heard him talk about this poem. My wife, Lauren, right there, is a writer and a teacher. She taught urban ed for many years, including Springfield, Massachusetts, and Paterson, New Jersey. In fact, she would teach developmental English at a community college in Paterson. And on her day off, she would volunteer to teach adult literacy at a rehab center called Ava's Village in Paterson, New Jersey. She is the tutor in this poem. And the meaning of the poem has changed since I wrote it, because now it serves as a tribute to all the teachers and all the learners and the principle of education under attack every day in this country. Page 48, Gonzo. Everybody knew Gonzo. His cigarettes and cologne, his gold crucifix, the white t-shirt he wore to every meeting. They leaned closer to listen whenever he spoke in the circle at the rehab center, some with eyes shut, seeing his confessions of addiction's demons and sobriety's angels at war. No one knew Gonzo signed his name with an X. The tutor at the rehab center held up flashcards and sounded out the letters A, B, C. There was no alphabet song in Gonzo's head, no teacher at the blackboard. He said the letters one by one. At the letter S, he stopped. The tutor studied Gonzo's nose, long but not as long as the nose of the Muppet with the same name. S, she said again. Gonzo had no front teeth, no place for his tongue to go. He puffed and sprayed, a man unable to navigate the river of his own name, Gonzales. He hid his face in his hands, unlettered cards in his head, as if the tutor could not see him now. A sob surged through him, a beast chained to the rock of his ribs for 50 years, since the days the roosters woke him up for school in Puerto Rico. He wiped his face clean. Gonzo was clean. Clean fingernails, clean shaven, clean white shirt. The tutor waited, thinking. He doesn't know his letters, but he knows every street in Patterson by name. She squeezed Gonzo's wrist once, then again, till his eyes met hers. She held up the next flashcard. She said, "Say T." And as you also heard, it's a very thorough introduction. I've been writing love songs to Lauren in the voices of weird, strange creatures. Moa, bat with vertigo. Most bizarrely of all, love song of the disembodied head in a jar. That's far too disturbing, so I'm not going to read that one. I will read this one, though. This is also quite strange. This is a love song. It's on page 65. It's a love song to Lauren in the voice of a dish of plátanos maduros. It's a love song in the voice of a dish of fried plantains. And it's a sonnet if you care about that sort of thing. Here we go. Love song of the plátanos maduros. No. This is not a song for us. Ripe plantain sliced and fried in a pan. This is a song for you. A song in praise of your mouth and tongue. A song anticipating your anticipation of the first bite into our yellow hearts. A song to celebrate the delirium of the first kiss from you. No, this is not a song for us, the alchemy of the tough skin, green, then yellow, then black. This is a song for you, a song in praise of your nose breathing us in, a song for your eyes as they close to contemplate this offering, more tempting than the wafer in church. No. This is not a song for us, flying from islands where the peasant stain of the plátano says, "This is who I am." This is a song for you, a song in praise of your hands lifting us slowly on the fork as if to savor the delicacy of aristocrats, a song of delight in your delight. We live to be useful, and useful we will be, warming your belly as you crave one more. We will die heroes. We will die happy on your lips. There are all kinds of love poems, as I have just amply demonstrated. So, another one. This is a poem for my dear friend, teacher, and mentor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Steve Stern. Steve and his wife, Florencia Mahjong, are historians of Chile, where she was born. And Florencia is now in memory hospice. Some of you know the song Gracias a la Vida, Thanks to Life. That's featured here, page 77. The poem is called Florencia, Again and Again, for Steve Stern. The singers sang to Florencia Mahjong today. The threshold singers stood at the bedside in memory hospice and sang. As the poster of Frida Kahlo looked on, as Florencia looked on, the only word she spoke was no. The only word still left on her tongue as she colored in her coloring book. The chorus sang as you walked into the room, and Florencia's eyes brimmed with the sight of you, husband, compañero. You slid behind her, arms looped around her neck, and she leaned back, lips sprouting for a kiss on the mouth, once, then again. Let's sing to the singers, you said. You queued up the song on your cell. You sang, Gracias a la vida que me he dado tanto. Thanks to life that has given me so much. Florencia sang in Spanish, was Florencia again, the song drifting from a window in the girlhood Santiago of her head. She became the writer of histories she could no longer read, the teacher of students who would remember what she could not remember, Florencia again. When life in the song gave her the abecedario, she sang the word for alphabet from a spring so deep in the cavern of her brain, no neurologist could ever find it, Florencia again. When life in the song gave her La Marcha de mis pies cansados, she sang about the march of my tired feet, loud enough to startle the pack of nurses in the hallway, the march with you, her compañero, your tired feet trying to keep up with her, the march against the dictator in her Chile, all the songs the crowd would sing, Florencia again. How do you kill an idea? Florencia said to me when I asked why so many had to die in Chile at an age when I still had to ask. 6 words I will carry like tiny shells from Chile as long as I remember what I remember. Florencia again. Gracias. You sang with Florencia at the bedside to the singers at Memory Hospice. You handed them the sheets with the printed lyrics of the song. Next time when you come, you can sing it to her. You said, Florencia again. My teacher, tomorrow you will turn the knob all hands dread, as if the steel would liquefy their fingers. Walk through the door once more and sing. And so Florencia will become Florencia again and again. So, I'm going to close with this poem, and we're going to go right to the book signing in the interest of time. So if you have a question, please come and say hello. Thanks again, To you, thank you. Colin. I want to close with a poem about Puerto Rico. It's the last poem in the book on page 99. This one's based on a pilgrimage to an old cemetery in Viejo San Juan to find two tombs. The first, the tomb of José de Diego. José de Diego was a poet and a political leader called the father of the independence movement in the early 20th century. And his poems use a Puerto Rican saying as an allegory for resistance to U.S. colonialism. Cada guaraguao tiene su pitirre. Cada guaraguao tiene su pitirre. Every hawk has his kingbird, like every Goliath has David. Okay. The second tomb, that of Pedro Albizu Campos. Albizu for short. Pedro Albizu Campos was the head of the Nationalist Party, revolutionary leader of the independence movement, and a political prisoner in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So we got to the cemetery, Lauren was there, and we discovered that it was infested by iguanas. And some people say to me, oh, Martín, you Latin Americans are so good with the magical realism. I say, no, there were iguanas in the cemetery. In fact, the whole island was infested by iguanas, and I had my metaphor. So I'll close with this, and it's called The Iguanas Skitter Through the Cemetery by the Sea, Viejo San Juan, Puerto Rico. The iguanas slither from the branches of trees splintered by the hurricanes. The iguanas crawl from the cracks in the ground split by the earthquakes. The iguanas rise from brown flood waters that carry bridges to their doom. The iguanas multiply through the night of blackouts in hospitals and morgues. The iguanas burrow beneath roads to bury their eggs in the lungs of cities. The iguanas slap their clawed feet as they churn the earth of the farmer's field. Iguanas rip the rough skin of mango. Iguanas rip banana. Iguanas rip papaya. The iguanas skitter through the cemetery by the sea, tails snapping when they disappear between the crosses, sunning themselves on the walls, hiding in the crevices of crypts where families still cling to each other beneath the weathered stone. The iguana stares stupefied at the bust of a mustachioed poet who died after the bacteria feasted on his heart. The iguanas know nothing of José de Diego, his songs of the guaraguao and the pitirre, the hawk fleeing from the 2-ounce kingbird, the slash of claws to save her young still blind in the nest. The poet's hawk is long and dark with imperial wings. The poet's kingbird, an arrow through the neck. An iguana warms his belly on the flat stone that says Pedro Albizu Campos. The iguanas know nothing of Albizu, the lawyer and the cane cutter's strike, a crowd listening in the rain, cane stalks in their heads igniting like torches. The iguanas learn nothing from El Maestro, his staccato tongue on the radio slitting the ground under the boots of the military governor, collapsing the courthouses and flagpole of empire. The iguanas keep vigil at the tomb, burial stone white as the stone of seditious conspiracy that buried him, stone face of 30 years incarceration, subversive tongue gone to stone after the stroke. The iguanas forget the thousands in black sweeping his coffin to the edge of the sea. The green of the iguanas in the cemetery is the green of soldiers in uniform. The green of the iguanas in the cemetery is the green of felt at the casinos. The green of the iguanas in the cemetery is the green of cash on cruise ships. The green of the iguanas in the cemetery is the green stacked in steel vaults. The green of the iguanas in the cemetery is the green of lawn after lawn hidden by gates. The green of mangoes in a bowl on every table of the absentee landlords. In the movies, on the drive-in screens and Saturday matinees of the Cold War, iguanas played the dinosaurs. Horns glued to their snouts, frills pasted to their heads, thrashing in close-up struggle with other iguanas over the lost world. The dead eyes of the iguanas keeping vigil over the city of the dead will never see the asteroid of their extinction, the earth melting to suck their bones into whirlpools of mud, the waves sweeping them to sea, the flight of the poet's kingbird. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Thank you.